Imagine being the quietest person in the room, the one everyone looks over, only to realize that while they were laughing at you, you were busy conquering worlds they couldn't even dream of. For years, my students saw me as nothing more than Mr. Henderson, the boring history teacher with the fading corduroy jackets and the slightly messy desk who spent his lunch breaks grading papers in silence. They had no idea that when the sun went down and the headset went on, I was Viper, the top-ranked tactical shooter in the world with a professional contract that paid more in a single tournament than my teaching salary did in 3 years. I lived a double life that was perfectly balanced until a group of arrogant seniors decided to make my life a living hell, filming me for clout, and trying to ruin my reputation just because they thought I was a loser who didn't understand their world. But tell me, if you were sitting on a secret that could destroy the ego of every cool kid in school, would you keep it hidden to save your job? Or would you burn it all down just to see the looks on their faces? I had to decide if my dignity was worth more than my career, and honestly, after what they did to me, I'm still not sure if I made the right choice. Was I wrong for finally showing them who the real predator was? To understand how I ended up at that crossroads, you have to understand the two versions of me. By day, I am a 32-year-old high school teacher in a small town where everyone thinks they know everyone. I teach AP World History, a subject I genuinely love, but let's be real. To a 17-year-old with an iPhone, I'm just a background character in the movie of their life. I've always been introverted, a bit of a tech geek who preferred the company of books and keyboards to loud parties. My morning routine was a ritual of invisibility. I'd brew a standard pot of coffee, put on one of 5 identical beige shirts, and drive my 10-year-old sedan to the staff parking lot. Every day was a cycle of predictable patterns. The squeak of the chalk, the hum of the overhead projector, and the glazed expressions of teenagers who viewed my passion for the French Revolution as a personal affront to their time. I've always felt that the best teachers are the ones who let the curriculum shine brighter than their personalities, but that philosophy backfired. My colleagues thought I was just a lonely bachelor, who probably went home to feed a cat and watch documentaries. They saw a man who was settling for a quiet life, someone who had reached his ceiling, and was content to gather dust alongside the textbooks. They couldn't have been more wrong. By night, I was a cornerstone of the global esports scene. I had started gaming in college, and it turned out I had a freakish level of hand-eye coordination and tactical awareness. It wasn't just about clicking heads. It was about the psychology of the game, the ability to predict an opponent's move 3 steps before they even thought of it. What started as a hobby became a side hustle, and then it became a phenomenon. My setup was hidden behind a false wall in my basement, a liquid-cooled beast of a machine that hummed with more power than the entire school's computer lab. I had a massive following on a streaming platform, but I never used a face cam. I used a high-end 3D avatar and a voice modulator that deepened my tone just enough to make it unrecognizable. My fans knew me as a lethal, silent professional who could carry a team of 4 through the most impossible odds. I had sponsors, a secret bank account growing by the day, and a sense of power that my daytime persona could never touch. While my fellow teachers were complaining about the cost of living raises and the price of cafeteria food, I was quietly signing 6-figure endorsement deals with hardware giants, all while wearing a $20 watch from a drugstore and eating a ham sandwich I'd packed at home. The conflict started with a student named Leo. Leo was the typical high school alpha, captain of the varsity soccer team, wealthy parents, and a massive following on TikTok where he posted pranks that were really just forms of harassment disguised as content. He walked with a swagger that suggested the world was his personal playground, and anyone who didn't contribute to his view count was irrelevant. He was also a massive gamer, or at least he thought he was. He walked around the halls wearing expensive limited edition gaming merch and bragging about his rank in Strikeforce Global, the very game I played professionally. He'd talk loudly in the cafeteria about his clutch plays and his insane aim, unaware that I had literally designed some of the strategies he was struggling to execute. In class, Leo was a nightmare. He didn't just ignore my lessons. He actively tried to undermine me at every turn. He'd make comments about how those who can't do teach, and he'd try to bait me into tech conversations just to try and prove I was out of touch with modern culture. He would purposely mispronounce historical names just to see if I'd snap, Or he'd play game trailers at full volume when my back was turned, hoping for a reaction he could film. One Tuesday, things escalated significantly. I was mid-lecture on the Industrial Revolution, trying to explain the socio-economic impact of the steam engine, when I noticed Leo and his friends huddled around a phone, whispering and laughing in a way that felt predatory. I asked him to put it away, and instead of complying, he held the phone up for the whole class to see. He had found an old, grainy photo of me from my own high school days. I was thinner, had bad acne, and was holding a trophy at a local LAN tournament in a basement. He had scoured the deep web to find it, digging through archived local forums and regional news clippings from 15 years ago. The class erupted in laughter. "Look at the little nerd," Leo sneered, his eyes gleaming with the thrill of the kill. "Hey Mr. H, is this why you're so grumpy? Because you realized you'd never be a real pro? You're just a fanboy who settled for a chalkboard because you couldn't make the cut in the real world." I felt the heat rise in my neck, a familiar fire I usually reserved for high-stakes tournaments. My heart began to pound with the rhythm of a competitive match, but I kept my cool, forcing my voice to stay level. I just told him to sit down and that his behavior was pathetic. But it didn't stop there. Over the next week, the pranks transitioned from annoying to genuinely malicious. They photoshopped my face onto embarrassing characters and posted them on the school's confessions page with captions about my failed dreams. They'd accidentally spill sticky energy drinks on my grading rubrics. One afternoon, I found my tires deflated in the parking lot with a note that read, "Too slow for the fast lane, Mr. H." The breaking point came when I walked into the faculty lounge and found my colleagues talking about a video Leo had posted. He had followed me to my car after school and filmed me from a distance while narrating a documentary about the lonely life of a failed gamer. He caught me carrying a box of new hardware, a high-end, top-of-the-line GPU I'd ordered for my streaming rig, and mocked me for wasting money on a PC that would never make me cool. He called me a washed-up basement dweller, and the video got 50,000 views in 3 hours. The disrespect was palpable. I was being bullied by a teenager, and the school administration was useless because Leo's father was a major donor to the athletic department. I was told to have thicker skin and find ways to connect with the students. The principal actually had the nerve to tell me that maybe if I was more relatable like Leo, the kids would respect me more. He suggested I start a gaming club where Leo could lead the sessions. It was the ultimate insult. That night, I logged into my stream, my hands shaking with suppressed rage. My chat noticed something was off immediately. "Viper, you're playing aggressive tonight," one of my moderators messaged. I wasn't just playing. I was venting. I was taking out my frustrations on every digital opponent I encountered, moving with a speed and ferocity that left my viewers stunned. I realized then that I didn't have to take it. I knew that the Regional Strike Force tournament was coming up, and it was an open qualifier event held at a local gaming arena. I also knew, from overhearing Leo's loud bragging in the hallway about his unbeatable skills and his new sponsors, that his squad had signed up to play in the amateur bracket. They were convinced they were the best in the state, mostly because they only played against people they could intimidate or lag switch. I decided right then that I was going to enter. Not as Viper, the pro. That would be a breach of my contract and would reveal my identity too early, potentially ruining my career before I was ready to pivot. I signed up as a solo wildcard under a completely new, burner handle, TheHistoryGrad. The plan was simple. I would work my way through the bracket, and if the stars aligned, I would face Leo's team in the semifinals. I spent the next 2 weeks in a state of hyper-focus that bordered on the obsessive. I practiced for 6 hours every night, refining my aim until it was indistinguishable from an aimbot. In class, I was more boring than ever. I played the part of the defeated teacher to perfection. I let Leo think he had won the psychological war. I let him make his jokes about my outdated tech knowledge. I even let him trap me into a conversation where he challenged me to a 1v1 in front of his friends, which I declined with a fake, stuttering, "I don't really play much anymore. It's too fast for me. The graphics give me a headache." He filmed that too, calling me a coward to his followers. The arrogance was perfect. He was so convinced of his own superiority that he never saw the trap being laid. He thought he was playing a game with a sheep, not realizing he was poking a hibernating wolf. The Friday of the tournament arrived. I told the school I was taking a personal day for a family matter, which wasn't technically a lie. I was taking care of my own dignity. I drove to the arena 2 towns over, wearing a heavy oversized hoodie and a face mask. Easy to explain away in a crowded indoor venue where many players still wore masks for privacy or health. When I arrived, the energy was electric, a mixture of sweat, electronics, and pure competitive tension. There were hundreds of players, but my eyes were only on one group. Leo and his friends were there, decked out in custom jerseys with Leo the Goat printed on the back in gold foil. They were loud, obnoxious, and already acting like they had won the trophy, taking selfies with fans who only knew them from their local TikTok fame. They were treating the tournament like a victory lap before it even began. As the tournament progressed, I played like a ghost. I didn't use any of my signature, Viper flashy moves. I played with a cold, robotic efficiency that was even more terrifying. I took out teams with surgical precision, moving through the bracket without breaking a sweat. Because I was a solo wildcard, the organizers paired me with 3 other random players. A college kid, a middle-aged dad, and a shy teenager. But it didn't matter. I carried them so hard it looked like they were spectators in a pro match. I was hitting shots that shouldn't have been possible, using movement techniques that only the top 0.1% of players knew, but I disguised them just enough to look like lucky flick shots. I was playing a mental game as much as a physical one, keeping my movements erratic so no one could pin down my style. By the time the semifinals were announced, the hidden prodigy in the hoodie was the talk of the arena. People were whispering about my reaction times and my uncanny ability to know exactly where the enemy was at all times. The casters were trying to figure out if I was an alt account for a known pro. And then it happened. The bracket reset, and the big LED screen flashed the matchup. Team Leo versus the Wildcards. I felt a surge of adrenaline so strong I thought my heart might burst through my ribs. This was the moment. This was where the boring teacher met the TikTok star, on the only field that mattered to him. Before the match started, Leo walked past our stations. He didn't recognize me, of course. He just looked at my hoodie and laughed, leaning over to whisper so my teammates could hear. "Hey, hope you're ready to get clipped for my channel, man. Don't take it personally when we embarrass you. Maybe if you lose fast enough, I'll give you a shout out so you can get some actual followers. It's tough being a nobody, right?" I didn't say a word. I just adjusted my mouse pad, checked my DPI settings and waited for the countdown. I could see my own reflection in the darkened monitor. A man who had been pushed too far, ready to reclaim his name and burn a legacy to the ground. So here I was, moments away from either proving a point or losing everything I had worked for. I had my career on the line, because if I got too caught up and my identity was revealed, the school board would have a field day. They'd call it a conflict of interest or claim I was humiliating a student. My mortgage, my health insurance, my standing in the community, it was all on the gambling table. But Leo had pushed me too far. He had tried to ruin my reputation in the real world by making me look like a pathetic failure, so I was about to ruin his in the only world he actually cared about, the digital one where he thought he was a god. I had to decide if the look on his face would be worth the potential fallout. Before I tell you how that match went down and the absolute chaos that followed when the mask finally came off, I want you to stop right now and really think. Think about the people in your life that you've underestimated. Think about that one person everyone picks on because they seem weak or boring. What would you do if you found out they were secretly a master of something you loved? Would you be terrified of what else they were hiding? Or would you be impressed? Drop a comment below and tell me. Would you have stayed hidden and kept your steady paycheck? Or would you have taken the risk to humiliate your bully in front of thousands of people? Is revenge best served cold? Or is it better when it's broadcast in 4K? The match began, and it wasn't a game, it was an execution. I didn't just play to win. I played to demoralize every single fiber of his being. I wanted to break his spirit so completely that he'd never want to touch a keyboard again. In the first round, I took out Leo's entire 4-man squad in under 30 seconds using only a basic pistol, while they all had high-tier rifles. I moved like a shadow, flanking them before they even knew the round had started. The arena went silent for a beat, then erupted into a roar. The casters were screaming into their mics, asking who this no-name was and how he just outplayed a coordinated team with a starter weapon. Leo was visible on the stage camera, his face turning a deep, angry shade of purple. He started shouting at his teammates, accusing them of lagging, throwing the game, or not paying attention. He was tilting and I knew it. I leaned into it. Every time I killed him, I did a specific subtle movement, a Viper signature, that I knew he would recognize if he truly watched pro streams. I saw him freeze for a second after the third time I did it. But it didn't matter what they did. Every time he turned a corner, I was there waiting. Every time he tried to set up a cool play for his stream, I shut him down with a headshot that felt like a physical slap in the face. I was reading him like an open textbook. I knew his patterns because they were the patterns of every arrogant amateur I'd ever faced. I was counting his bullets, tracking his cooldowns, and manipulating his movements like a puppeteer. By the 10th round, Leo was a mess. He was slamming his desk, his headset was crooked, and he looked like he was on the verge of a public breakdown. He started typing in the global match chat, desperate for an excuse, calling me a cheater and a hacker, claiming I had an aimbot. I simply typed back one sentence that I knew would haunt him forever. Maybe you should have spent more time practicing and less time filming your teachers. The silence that followed in the game chat was deafening. It was as if the air had been sucked out of the room. Leo froze. You could see the realization hitting him on the big screen. The gears turning as he tried to connect the loser teacher with the god on the screen. He looked over at my station, squinting, trying to peer under the shadows of my hood. I knew the moment was coming. We won the match 16-0. A total, humiliating shutout in front of a live crowd and 10,000 viewers on the tournament stream. It was the most lopsided match in the tournament's history. As the victory screen flashed in giant letters, I stood up. My teammates were jumping for joy, but I remained perfectly still. The crowd was cheering my burner name, demanding to see the face of the player who had just dismantled the state's best amateur team without losing a single life. I slowly pulled back my hood and removed my mask, letting the harsh stage lights hit my face. The gasps from the front row were audible. Leo was standing 5 feet away, his mouth hanging open, his face draining of all color until he looked like a ghost. He looked small. He looked like the child he actually was. Mr. Henderson? He stammered, his voice cracking so loud it was picked up by the stage mics and broadcast to everyone in the arena, and everyone watching online. I didn't yell. I didn't gloat or do a victory dance. I didn't need to. I just walked over to his station, looked him dead in the eye while the cameras zoomed in for the money shot, and said, "The Industrial Revolution was about the shift from manual labor to machine-driven efficiency. Today, you learned about the shift from arrogance to reality. You're not a pro, Leo. You're just a loud kid with an audience. See you in class on Monday. Don't forget your homework. It's 20% of your grade, and unlike this game, you can't respawn from a failing grade." The aftermath was a whirlwind of chaos that I hadn't fully prepared for. Someone had recorded the unmasking from the crowd, and it went viral within hours. By the time I got home, I had 3,000 new emails and my phone wouldn't stop vibrating. The Gamer Teacher was the top headline on every gaming news site, and even a few local news stations. People were calling it the greatest unmasking in esports history. When I walked into school on Monday, the atmosphere had completely shifted from mockery to awe. The hallways went quiet as I passed, but it was a quiet of respect, not exclusion. Students who used to ignore me or snicker when I walked by were lining up outside my door just to ask what mouse sensitivity I used, or if I could give them tips on their positioning. But Leo? Leo was destroyed. His clout was gone in an instant. The very people who followed him for his skills were now making compilation videos of him getting bodied by his history teacher. He had been humiliated in the most public way possible, and his TikTok following turned on him overnight, mocking him for being owned by a man in a corduroy jacket. He tried to claim I was unprofessional, and that I had trapped him, but the internet had already decided he was the villain. He was the bully who got what was coming to him. The school board tried to discipline me, calling me into a closed-door meeting to discuss my outside activities. They tried to argue that I had targeted a student and created a hostile learning environment. They were more worried about Leo's father pulling his donations than they were about the truth. But they didn't realize who they were dealing with. I wasn't just a teacher anymore. I was a brand. Since I hadn't broken any laws and the tournament was a public, off-campus event, there wasn't much they could do. Especially once my pro team's legal counsel stepped in to protect my brand. I had more power in that meeting than the principal did. And the look on his face when he realized my net worth was 10 times his, and that I had enough evidence of the school's negligence regarding Leo's bullying to sue them into the ground, was worth every bit of the stress. I ended up resigning a few months later anyway. I stayed long enough to finish the semester because I didn't want to abandon the students who actually cared about history. With the reveal of my identity, my stream exploded in popularity, jumping from a few thousand viewers to 50,000 overnight. My Viper persona was now merged with the Mr. Henderson story, creating a brand that was unlike anything else in the scene. I started a charity for kids who were being bullied, using the money from my tournaments to fund counseling and tech programs. I decided it was time to finally stop hiding and pursue gaming full-time. I didn't need the teaching salary, and the school had become a circus of people wanting my autograph or trying to get on my stream. I left the school with my head held high, having taught the most important lesson of my career. Never mistake silence for weakness, and never assume you're the smartest person in the room just because you have a loud mouth and a smartphone. I even heard Leo ended up transferring schools because the Mr. Henderson memes were too much for him to handle. His parents tried to buy his way into a private academy, but the story followed him there too. It turns out, when you build your entire identity on being better than others, it only takes one person to show you the truth to make the whole thing crumble like a house of cards. The transition from teacher to full-time pro was easier than I expected. I traded the chalkboard for a 240 Hz monitor, and the faculty meetings for strategy sessions with some of the best players in the world. I still get messages from my former students, telling me how they stood up to their own bullies because of what I did. That means more to me than any trophy. I realized that my time in the classroom wasn't a waste. It gave me the patience and the tactical mind to succeed in the server. And I realized that the Viper avatar was just as real as Mr. Henderson. I wasn't two people. I was one person who had finally found a way to bridge the gap between his passion and his profession. I still wear the corduroy jacket sometimes when I stream, just to remind people where I came from. It's become a bit of a meme in the community. Whenever I make a big play, the chat fills up with classes in session and homeworks due. It's a good life. I'm no longer the guy everyone looks over. Now they're the ones looking up. Looking back, I realized that the boring version of me was just a mask I wore to fit into a society that doesn't always value quiet passion or digital mastery. We all have a Viper inside of us, a part of our identity that we keep hidden because we're afraid people won't understand it, or that it doesn't fit the professional mold. We're taught to blend in, to not make waves, and to accept the roles people assign to us. But sometimes, showing the world who you really are is the only way to get the respect you deserve. Sometimes, you have to break the rules to fix the game. Leo learned the hard way that the people you look down on might be the ones who are miles ahead of you in ways you can't even perceive. He thought he was the predator, but he was just prey with a loud bark. If this story taught you anything, let it be this. Be careful who you bully, because you never know who is holding the controller, and who is just waiting for the right moment to reset the game, and show you what real power looks like. Like this video if you were on my side and think Leo got exactly what he deserved for his arrogance. Subscribe for more stories about secret lives, hidden talents, and epic revenge, and share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section. I want to know if you think I should have stayed a teacher and used my fame to inspire more kids, or if I was right to walk away and live my dream in the spotlight. Did I go too far, or was the lesson necessary? I'll see you all in the next story.